My conversation today on Behind the Act is with Eddie Haddad. He's been a working guitarist for over a decade, and today we're talking about the importance of tenacity in order to be successful in the music industry, and the importance of having in-person connection in a world that's so driven by social media. I'm Seth Schaeffer. This is Behind the Act with Eddie Haddad. So you've been a working guitarist, not just a guitarist, but a working guitarist for well over 10 years. Mm-hmm. That is a feat in itself, and I'm curious how you sustain that, and what lessons have you learned through that process specifically?
Oh boy, well, the sustaining it is a process. You know, those 10 some odd years of doing it were not equal, like in terms of sustainability. It took. I mean, I pretty much had to spend my late 20s really focused on really hustling. And it was much more scraping by back then. But so I moved to LA when I was 26. So I wasn't like fresh out of high school, right? I was like, I kind of grew up a little bit and understood who I was as a person and wanted to maintain that at my core. But because I was well aware of moving to LA and being potentially molded into somebody I didn't want to be.
And that was from Houston, right?
From Houston, yeah,
Okay.
straight from Houston. And so the first year for sure was like the hardest because it was like the biggest culture shock of my life, you know, living in a town that every day feels like an uphill battle, you know. But what I ended up doing was the most important value that I learned to have is tenacity. And I was not only just, that wasn't like an intuitive thing. Like I was told that by people that I worked with. The reason I moved to LA, I was writing music for dance crews. That was kind of like my initial project, my way in to the LA scene was through dance crews.
And just to be clear, when you're saying dance crews, you mean dance teams that are doing things, or like a cruise that does dancing? Sorry.
No, sorry. Like a crew, like a dance crew.
Okay, cool.
So I was working with dancers who were on like America's Best Dance Crew, and So You Think You Can Dance and stuff. And one of my oldest friends growing up, his name's Philip Shabib, world famous dancer. He like revolutionized like it's a style where it's like you make your hands look like water. It's like he looks like he has no bones. Like it's crazy. He's like he's like on the level of like in the dance world is on the level of like Hendrix would be in the guitar world. Like he's left a mark. Like dancers now emulate him.
Amazing.
You know, and we grew up together in Houston, and so he went off to do professional dance like years before I even thought about doing music professionally. And he pretty much convinced me to give it a shot. And he enabled that by bringing me on to work on, his crew was doing a return performance on season 7 of America's Best Dance Crew. And he's like, I want you to help us with the music. And he's like, you'll fly out to LA. And I was like, nothing like that ever happened to me before. This is back in 2011. And I was like, yeah, dude, this sounds amazing. Like nothing like this has ever happened in Houston, you know. So I did it, and I worked with a producer friend of mine, and we both we were like this kind of duo that we were just making the dance music for him. And so we did this. It was like a dubstep. This is when dubstep was still pretty huge. We were doing a dubstep remix of a Katy Perry song, which is what we were commissioned to do, and we flew out and we performed it live. On television, you know, and we were in astronaut outfits and everything. People were speculating that we were Daft Punk because we were two guys in astronaut outfits.
Yeah,
but no, it was just me and Jordan. You know,
that's amazing.
The producer, and so, yeah, like that was crazy. And so that was kind of my foot in the door. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is the kind of stuff that's possible. I was like, dude, like I got to be here. You know, so he really pulled me out of that.
Did you think you were actually an astronaut? Is that why?
I mean, I certainly felt like I you know, quantum leapt like to another planet as far as what I was doing, you know, with the guitar.
Which is true with LA anyway.
Right, exactly. It's really good at seducing you into thinking that, that you're doing stuff like that, right? But and of course, once I moved there, it was a whole different story. Mm-hmm. But I was like, okay, this is what I got to do. So I saved up for 8 months, and then when I moved to town, it's like all the connections that I thought I had except maybe like one or two just completely fell off the map. Like I didn't exist anymore to them, you know. But one of them, it was this group of producers called District 78 that did a lot of the stuff on those dance shows. So I met them through that whole thing. They were really nice guys, and they even allowed me to come to their studio one morning, and they just wanted to like kind of give me a sort of they just wanted to let me know what the score was. Now that you're in LA, here's what you got to know. And that was really cool of them, first of all, to even bother doing that with me. But I never forgot what they told me. And the first thing they said was, you got to be tenacious.
Yeah.
They're like, not annoying, but you got to be tenacious. Reason why is because when people wake up in the morning, they're not thinking about you. It's not like it's like you have to sort of like get in front of them, right? So I was like, okay, I can do that. I'm pretty good at that. It's just figuring out how to not be annoying was the difficult part. But I was like, you know what? Better to do it than to not do it, right? So that was huge for me because, and then like equipped with that understanding, I just went out and put myself out there every night, dude. Like, and I'm telling you, the nights that I almost didn't, where I was like, you know, you've had a 4-night streak going out to networking events and open mics and jams and all these different things. Like, you deserve a break, right? And I'm like, no, I should probably go out. And those are always the nights where I meet someone that to this day is still a significant connection.
Amazing.
So a very long-winded way of saying that, I mean, the tenacity part was really the most important.
Yeah.
Because you can't really expect, like, you can't have an attachment to how things are going to look. You really just have to go out there and find out for yourself, and you have to be relentless about it.
How have you decided which groups to attach to or not? And I guess even more importantly, continue to work with?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, in the beginning, I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find anybody. And I think that's I think that's the best thing to do because it's such a subjective thing. Like certain people I'd want to work with, maybe someone else wouldn't, and vice versa, you know? So for me, I just had to just take on what I could. And a lot of it was very, like, it was menial stuff. Like, it was either I was working for free or for very little, you know? And at the time I was like, well, I guess this is what I got to do to get, you know, ahead. And so I did a lot of that. And then once I started to slowly build a reputation and status, I guess you could say, it took a couple years, you know, but I would start getting calls from people like, you know, hey, I want to bring you on to work on this record, or, you know, I need you for this round of shows. I have this singer that just got off The Voice and want to put a band together, you know, so I'd get stuff like that. And by then, you know, I was able to give people a rate and say like, all right, cool. This is my rate. And like, I'm not doing anything for free anymore, you know? But once I started to kind of get in circulation, I guess once people started knowing my name, I felt like that was a good time to be a little bit more selective on who I was working with. And for me, it's always about just like the person's integrity, you know, and obviously like how fun the project is, how good the songs are, you know.
Kind of important.
Yeah, right. I mean, in the beginning,
I'm teasing, but
it was like in the beginning, I was just doing whatever I could, working with whoever I could, whether I liked their music or hated it, didn't matter. I was working, or what I thought was working. But it was like I was working in the sense that even though I wasn't making money, it's just kind of how this whole economy is built. Is you just, when you're on the bottom tier, you just kind of have to climb, you know. So I was just doing that, and I think once you reach that kind of middle ground where, okay, people hire you now, you get paid, you still want to take what you can get because LA is very scarce, or at least it appears very scarce because everyone's competing actively. You know, it's a lot different from here. Whereas like I was telling you earlier, you know, if I can't do a gig, I will happily give it to a friend of mine, you know, and vice versa. You know, just have this kind of revolving door of friends that throw each other gigs. You don't have that in LA. You know, so you really were on your own. You had to find stuff yourself. And then after doing that for a while, then, you know, and the tenacity starts to pay off. Then people start to think about you, and then they put you on their short list. And then it was after doing enough of that, I started to think, okay, I'm going to start being more selective, because I didn't have the luxury of being selective in the beginning, even in the beginning of getting paid.
Right.
because of how little you get paid out there.
Yeah, but the stereotype is like, yeah, you go to a restaurant and your server's probably a better guitar player than you are. And,
Right. Yeah.
and literally everybody's just trying to barely cover their portion, their 1/5 of rent in a 1-bedroom apartment for, you know. But that tenacity is really, it's intriguing, something I really haven't thought about. I've always just been like, no to LA personally. In the film side, especially, I'm not interested in doing narrative film work. It's not my world. And it's, of course, enormous there. But then as a director and a cinematographer, like, I'm a nobody. I mean, and I'm a nobody everywhere, anywhere. That's fine. But like, but I'm saying that, but I wouldn't know how to pay my bills. But it's what you're saying. It's like the people that I know that have broken into that industry there, like they did exactly what you're saying, but just in the cinema way. They're showing up. They're running camera, their lights, they're grabbing coffee, they're running, doing PA positions until they start to climb.
Right.
And I think that there's something to learn from that grit. And I find some people fall in love with the chaos of it and just like the fact that it's chaotic and their lives are chaotic and it's always busy and they're always working with people that are exciting, famous, and or jerks. Like that's what feeds them and drives them.
Right.
And I don't know how do you perceive, without trying to bash LA or Nashville, like what are your perceptions of the each town? And really, I guess to be fair, I shouldn't tell you not to bash anything. Like
no,
give me an unfiltered answer.
I mean, it's not like it's like there are people that thrive in LA, and like I don't want to say I reached quite that level, but it was like this. When I first moved there, I was like 100% uncomfortable. And then as the years went on, that percentage would shrink to like, okay, now I'm like 68% uncomfortable. And then I think by the time I actually left LA, I was like maybe still 7% uncomfortable.
Right.
Maybe 13% uncomfortable. Like it didn't feel like home. It didn't have a home feeling to me. I was like, it's very much a transient kind of town. I mean, everyone seems to know that, but it's like, this isn't the kind of town I want to have kids in, and just me personally. Like there are people that manage to do it, and good for them. I mean, who am I to bash that, right?
Right.
But there was a time when the chaos was fun.
Yeah.
Like when I was the remainder of my 20s, but then after a while, I was like, I realized that if I get too caught up in this, because I would know people that would be like 10, 20 years older than me that were still caught up in that chaos. And I felt like that was a vortex I just didn't want to get sucked down into that. I wanted to move on from it.
Yeah.
So I was putting in the work, still trying not to have any expectation on when I would have to stop working quite to that level. But, I'm fortunate enough to say that it just took about 3 to 4 years before I kind of had a groove going. And by no means was I even comfortable living, but I was paying my bills. I wasn't
in 3 to 4 years in LA.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't freaking out about, what I was going to eat that day, which was pretty much a daily occurrence when I first was there,
Yeah.
Like I burned through my savings so quickly, and then I just realized like I had no income coming in, and I was doing all kinds of weird odd jobs. Because the thing is, like, the thing about LA is that it's not supportive of you trying to find other ways to make money if you're trying to be a musician or anything in entertainment. Because if, let's say, you're trying to work part-time at Starbucks, just to pay some bills, but then you're there working and then it's 2 p.m. and then all of a sudden you get hit up to do an audition, and you can't be like, well, I'm at work, I can't come. Then they're just like,
sense.
Okay, too bad. We're going to use the next guy or call the next guy. So it's like, it was very much a catch-22 kind of town in that regard, where you had this, you either had to fully commit yourself to starving for a while, or get lucky and, or not get lucky, really think about your schedule and like figure out a way to like work little odd jobs here. I did some brand ambassador work, which was just gig work basically. And it was like a variety of different gig work that I was doing that helped, but nothing stable, you know. And when I finally got something stable enough, I don't know if you remember Ty Lopez, but like he was.
That sounds really familiar.
Do you remember when
glasses, kind of
the guy in the garage with his Lamborghini?
Yep.
How he was on every YouTube ad in like 2014. So I worked for him for about 6 months.
Okay, awesome.
In his marketing department, and learned a lot, and it was great because it was a stable job. But even like Hollywood finds its way into everything, even corporate, like it's
Totally.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
so it was an interesting dynamic working there, but I learned a lot for sure. And it was actually through that job that I met Charlie Wallace, who's the owner of Guitar Mastery Method, the company I work for now.
Okay.
And what's funny is that if you look back, like what led up to me meeting Charlie and like working for Ty and everything, it was meeting someone on a night that I almost didn't go out.
Perfect.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So like, if I were to offer any bit of advice, it's like especially when it comes to tenacity, is like you have to be a little uncompromising about it, because it's a numbers game, man. Like you may not go one day out of an entire week of going out and trying to network and meet people, and that's the critical day. You just don't know.
So when you're hungry, it's easier, let's say, to be tenacious, because you're like, I have no option. I've got to go push. I have nothing to lose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When you get more comfortable, how do you retain that tenacity? Because my assumption is that, if you left with 7% discomfort in LA, that's pretty good. How do you retain that tenacity and stay mentally healthy?
That's a great question. I'm still tenacious, but not nearly as much as I was. I don't really hustle anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of in a place now that I'm really happy with where I'm at, and moving to Nashville. So sorry, I completely dodged your question about like between LA and Nashville. Moving here was great because, for one, I fit in with the scene a whole lot more, and there's a lot more camaraderie here. And so there's a lot less strings attached to things, There's still some elements of that here, but having lived in LA, it's easy for me to spot. And it's therefore easier for me to like yay or nay on a job that I want to do.
But the people in Nashville are still, people.
Yeah, they're still people persons,
exactly.
And like we care about, and it still has a small town kind of feel. So we care about each other, and we support each other. And if there's a bad apple, it's like everyone's going to know about it, So moving to Nashville after living in LA was huge because I feel like I had brought a gun to a knife fight in a way, in terms of the lessons that I've learned. And obviously it wasn't like I was grandfathered in to the point where all the gigs I was doing in LA, like all of a sudden I had all these gigs in Nashville. Like I had nothing in Nashville. I'm sorry, I take that back. I had one gig that I was working with while I was still living in LA, and that's why I was flying here a lot. And I started to think like I should probably be living here because I'm flying here all the time to play. So I did have like a gig that brought me in, but it was a steady gig as far as like work, but still no one really knew me other than that. So I had to put myself out there, but I didn't have to do it nearly at the level. And I think for me, it was the fact that this is more of a small town kind of feel. There's kind of the select spots that you really need to go to in order to meet the people you need to meet.
Right.
Whereas in LA, it's just kind of everywhere. You know what I mean? Like I was going to events in Santa Monica or North Hollywood or Pasadena. It's just like it was all over the place. I was just trying to find something or somebody. And, going back to our topic on expectations, it's like if I met someone that I felt like was going to help me in some kind of way, I had to make sure not to like put an expectation on when that would be. Because, when you're young and you're hungry, you get excited and you're kind of desperate a little bit too, right?
Totally.
So you're like, this guy's got to help me tomorrow at the latest, right? But honestly, some of them took a year, maybe more, before I saw any kind of tangible help from them. And that's not their fault. It's just how things turned out. You know, you
things
can't
take time.
Exactly.
And people with good intentions aren't going to follow through sometimes.
Right. And that's another reason why you got to be tenacious. Because like I would meet someone, let's say, like a producer who's real nice and like actually took time to talk with me, and I would ask some questions about, you know, the session world and stuff. And I get their number. You know, I would just hit them up, you know, like every once in a while, just to again be tenacious, remind them who I am, right? And just in regularly doing that, whenever something pops up where they think, oh, Eddie would be good for this, you know, because I texted him like maybe 2 weeks before that, or maybe even a week or something, I come to mind.
Staying top of mind is so important. I mean, that's we were talking about the ads.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to mention the ad because I don't want to say it, but I've been just like pummeled with this audio gear thing that you are also getting pummeled with. And it's like, do I need to buy it? Like, no, I definitely don't need to buy it, but
we're both in the target demographic, I guess, even though I don't.
Totally. I think that resonates exactly the same way as what I was talking about before too, with the social media front, where I don't want to post to social media, but I need to, but it's that top of mind thing. So if you're releasing art and you're releasing something, I mean, you have to stay top of mind. And figure out a way to do it in a way that's not, you know, we're not trying to talk at people either.
Right.
We're going to talk with people, you know?
Exactly.
So how do you do your social media management for yourself?
These days, man, social media is really just maintaining face. Like, it's just letting people know I'm still alive. And the only thing I really post is just music related stuff.
Yeah.
Like
So
my
shows
goings
you're
on. Yeah. Shows that I'm working, you know? That's really the only value I see in it personally, is just it's like maintaining your relevance.
Yeah.
It's, I don't really need it to connect with people, because the people I need to connect with, I just call them or text them, you know what I mean? Like, but with social media, it's especially now, it's like, if let's say someone refers, like needs a guitar player for a run and then refers me, that artist is going to want to stalk me on Instagram.
Right.
And I've seen this happen. I have a private account, so I'll get, you know, message requests or whatever, follow requests, and I'll see like, oh, that's an artist. There's a blue check mark. They're probably wanting to see what I'm all about, you know? And it happens a lot. And then sure enough, maybe a day or two later, I'll get a call from them, and then we'll work out the details, and I'll decide if I want to do the gig or not, you know?
Right.
So I would say, like, for what I do, like if you're a hired gun, like working guitar player, and that's kind of your thing, like that is important, just to make sure that I mean, because you have to have kind of a legendary status to not have any socials, and then just have someone want to work with you so bad that they'll like call whoever they need to get the number that's going to get them the number that you need to call to get to you. You know what I mean? To go through the whole pipeline to get to you, you have to be kind of someone who's already well established. Unfortunately, that's not me. So like, I have to maintain, like I said, maintain my relevance. So that's really what I use it for.
How do you, okay, so it's easy to advocate for other people, I think. And I find it difficult to self-advocate. And there's probably, I'm sure, plenty of other complex trauma components in my brain that are causing that. But what advice would you give to someone else for, like, as far as getting posts out there and what to share?
Let's say someone who's like new to town, maybe well,
or just anywhere in the world, even like that's an artist that isn't posting enough.
So
whatever that means.
The advice, I think that's a great question, because the advice I would give them is exactly what I would do, which is actually less social media and more in-person stuff. You still got to do the social media like tangentially, but I would not for a second expect that if I sit there and post stuff every day, that the gigs are just going to start like falling in my lap. It's like, it's from personal connection, because that goes really far, especially with artists, you know, and a lot of the artists I work with too. And I like to work with like legacy artists, you know, artists that are, it's like, not to make them sound old or anything, but it's like kind of, they're from a bygone age in the music industry. Before smartphones, before, you know what I mean? Like whether it's the 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, like getting to the point where like they care about eye contact and handshake deals, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like just kind of like old school.
Yep.
I've always resonated with them too. Like even though, like I don't know, I learned recently I'm considered an elder millennial.
Okay.
You know, which is hilarious.
Right.
Sounds hilarious to me. It's like making millennials sound wise all of a sudden.
That's so funny. You're an elder millennial. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I've always identified more with like Gen Xers and even Boomers. You know, as far as like that I care about those kind of old school values. I like talking on the phone.
Right.
You know, I like.
I'm very old school in that way for sure.
Yeah, and I like.
Just
I
call
like
you and
exactly like and just. I like breaking bread. Like, let's go get lunch and just chat for a while. You know, I like that kind of stuff. So I find that does go far with a lot of the artists that I tend to stick with working. But I've worked with a few like the younger ones too that are like younger than me and are just kind of like raised on social media, and it's different for sure. But I try to adapt. You know, like if they prefer texting, like that's fine. But again, it's like usually like if I do the gig and it's meh, it's like, you know, if they ask me to do it again, I'll just refer somebody. You know what I mean?
Well, so some of my, sorry, I do know what you mean. I didn't answer that.
No, it's okay.
I'm beating off of that. Some of the work that I do for film stuff, I do a lot of documentary stuff with like manufacturing and industrial clients. Some of the conversation that we have actually often about workforce development stuff is the multi-generational aspect of especially manufacturing workforces, where you have super young, you know, kids that are that don't run off of the same traditions of old workforce, you know.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to your elder friends that about working with younger generations these days? Like, how do you get them to respond and connect in ways that are fruitful?
I think the easiest thing is to try and meet them halfway, you know, because on one hand, if you're just going to bellyache about how these kids, they with their smartphones and it's like, you're just going to be mad all the time.
Right.
So if you got no other choice but to work with them, it's like, don't contribute to whatever thing that polarizes the young and old workforce. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of that these days. I think it's a lot to do with social media.
Yeah.
But I think just because it's like, I feel like the whole value of like respecting your elders is long gone. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about, like anyone young or be like, my parents taught me to respect my elders. Like, no, they don't, they do the opposite. So it's like, that being said, it's like, if you're an elder, you're not entitled to their respect. Now, whether that's good or bad, that's just how things are culturally. Don't expect it. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, meet them halfway. Like, give them reason to want to learn from you. Because I mean, I feel like anyone who's my elder, even people my age or younger, like everyone's who lived a different life than me knows something I don't.
Right.
And so I try to find ways to learn from anybody I work with. Now, granted, I mean, it's a kind of an aggregate thing. Like, I would much rather work with someone that I feel like can offer me a lot more than if it's like just try to find one thing to learn from somebody, you know, in which case then I sort of try to manage my time a little bit better. But yeah, I'd say meet them halfway. If you're older and you're working with younger people, let's say if you're running sound together, you know, just don't be the crotchety old, you know, gray hair that's just just gonna sit there like this the whole time. Right. And you know,
I'll play that role for you.
But I feel like you know, if you want to instill, let's say, good values in, like, you know, this is you want you want your sound to be like this, you know, you want to be able to hear everything in the mix, you want to get the whatever values you want to impart on them, make them want to learn. And I think it all comes down to just how you carry yourself, and just, you know, like I said, meet them halfway, tolerate some of the stuff that they're going to do, and, you know, try to inspire them.
Yeah. And maybe learn why they do things the way that they do.
Right. Like you might learn something too.
Just like they can learn about why you do the way you do things the way you do.
Yeah, man.
I have a question about your inspiration going into the songwriting front. Yeah, because you said you're getting into more, right? Songwriting now, or
I've always, for me, like I'm a co-writer. I have no aspirations of being my own artist.
yeah,
I have zero interest in that.
yeah,
I like to collaborate, you
yeah,
know? And I think that's to my advantage because for one, I don't have the pressure of like, I got to start cutting these songs and,
right.
putting some out there, getting the ball rolling. It's like, I just do it for the love of the craft, really. So, but because of that, it's like, it's very spotty as far as like the writing I've done over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm very bad about putting like a portfolio together.
What moves
But
you about it when you do it?
man, like I said before, it's the love of the craft. I feel like the creative muscle just needs to be flexed because if I'm working a lot and then I have no energy to be creative, like that's when you mentioned mental health, like the creative side of things is very good for my mental health. The working side of things is, and it isn't,
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. I do the working side of things because obviously I got to eat, you got to feed the family and everything. But if I were to, let's say, only take work that I like was creatively fulfilled by the music, I'd be starving. So
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta find joy in like like if an artist puts out music that's like, I don't think I'd listen to this recreationally, but I love playing guitar and I think there's fun guitar work on this track, and I'm gonna find joy in like where I fit in here, so that way I'm not miserable. Because if you're miserable and you're trying to perform,
Yeah.
well, the artist is gonna like that first of all. And
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Exactly.
like it.
And the audience and
The audience won't like. You'll be robbing everybody of.
What kind of moments in music when you listen recreationally move you, and why?
It's funny. Since becoming a father, I cry a lot more at stupid stuff. And it used to be a song had to really tug at the heartstrings to get me to cry. Now it's like a certain musical phrase on an instrument will just send me, you know what I mean? It'll just move me in a way. And I don't know, man, like things as little as just sound textures can really affect me.
Yeah.
And I very much, that's very much my metric is like what am I feeling when I'm listening to something? It used to just kind of be like, what's cool about it? Or like, does it have a really complicated, instrumental blowout halfway through? It's like when you're younger, it's like, or at least when I was younger, that was the kind of stuff I'd look for, the stuff that would excite me.
Yeah.
So I was really only looking for one feeling, was excitement. But now it's like any feeling at all. Because there's a lot of music out there that I feel nothing when I listen to it.
Right.
And everything's subjective. So that doesn't mean because I feel nothing that no one will feel anything. But if I feel nothing, then it's kind of like next,
Sure.
But, and sometimes it can just be a moment in a song. It doesn't even have to be the entire song, but I'll want to listen to the whole song just to lead me to that moment where I'm like, I almost like get a kick out of like trying to fight tears.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And like, man, it's just gotta move me in some way, whether it excites me or makes me think of, I don't know, like a very emotional time in my life or,
yeah.
I used to be very avoidant of like emotional stuff, but now I just let it hit me.
I know you said the kids, but why? I'm just curious.
It's hard to say, man. Like I like the way I kind of internalize it is like it was like a singular event or events, like having my children, because or maybe it's this. Maybe I always was an emotional guy. I just fought it for half my life.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm in a much more vulnerable place in the world, really being a father, I feel like is a very vulnerable thing.
Yeah.
Or at least it's an invitation to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I took that invitation because I'm not trying to be some emotionless, like I try to just feel things now, and it overcorrected. So it's like,
Yeah.
I feel things very hard now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's hard to say, man. I really feel like I attribute it to having kids. Maybe that was the catalyst,
Yeah.
maybe it's like having the responsibility, because, it's also a scary thing being a parent.
Yeah.
You're especially in a world like the world we live in today. It's like uh, the I don't know. I try not to be like a perpetual like worrier, but I worry a lot, and I think part of the reason why I worry is because I have such a deep like love for like my children, my wife too, but like with kids it's a whole different category, right?
Right.
And like
They're dependent
they're
upon you.
dependent on
Yeah.
you, and especially like, and you said your kids are 9 and 11, right? So mine are they're still little, and they're so fragile and vulnerable, and I think that the position that they're in, I just feel emotional over it in general, you know. Anyway,
Do you feel like you function more looking forward into the future as, a nihilist or a hopeful person?
no, I'm not totally black pilled. It's like
Yeah.
there are certain things that scare me a lot, but I think I really lean into my sense of purpose as a father because I think about when I was a kid, I felt untouchable. Like our house felt impenetrable to everything,
Yep.
every outside force. And being the person that needs to make my kids feel the same way, it's scary as hell. And I don't know if my dad was scared of it. Maybe he was. I mean, I'm sure it's something that everyone just kind of feels, but I just really lean into that, and it gives me a sense of purpose and a sense of poise. And I just try to focus on that. I try to focus on what I can control,
Yeah.
because the things I can't control, I'm not going to be able to control them no matter how much I worry about them.
Right.
So the least I can do is think about my children and my household and just control that. That's whatever happens outside, it's going to happen. Like I said, whether I worry about it or not. So
Right.
I found that if I get too caught up in like worrying about things, it actually affects the zen of the house. And I can't do that to them.
Right.
So, or myself, because it's just going to have a ripple effect, but so that combined with this new way of processing emotion, it's just been a lot of learning curves, man. Like being a relatively new father and then going through these kind of emotional breakthroughs, I guess. And it does impact because, what we do is a creative thing. And so it's very much tied into like our mental health, our emotions, all that stuff.
Yep.
So I just consolidating all that is interesting. I no longer compartmentalize it like I used to. Now it's just all kind of one big mess.
Well, I'm proud of you too for getting to the spot where you're comfortable to cry. I think that's if that wasn't a thing for a while, it's a hard thing to do. I remember the first time that I cried. By the way, I've never tried to not cry. But I don't think not that I'm not intentionally, right? But I remember there was a time where there was a sad moment in a movie and I was crying and the boys were weirded by it at one point. I forget how many years ago this was, but I was like, that's terrible. I hated that not weird is the wrong word. Like they were concerned about me because they hadn't seen me cry before. And I was like, gosh, that sucks. Because I want to be, I just wrote an artist the other day and I was like, that song was amazing. And it made me cry. And I literally said in the text, I need to which I need to do more. Like I literally just said that. I need to be moved by stuff. And there's another song. Have you heard The Meadow by Nickel Creek?
Mm-mm.
Oh gosh, it's so good. That song made me cry. That was the song before this last one that made me cry. Anyway, it's but it wasn't about the lyrics. It was about the texture and the power of the song. But
which it's you kind of inspired this thought, like vulnerability, like when it's invoked, whether it's through a sound or through a lyric, it doesn't matter. Like when a song, dude, I'd cry listening to "Faithfully" by Journey now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
awesome.
It just inspires vulnerability. Whereas, I've listened to that song a million times, and as a kid, I'm always like, oh, it's a ballad, cool. Now I listen to it and I just like, I'm just like,
It's
you
awesome.
know, even just thinking about it, like I get a little
Yeah.
misty eyed. Like, yeah, it's an interesting thing, man. And I no longer try to I no longer fight it, but I also no longer try to think like, why is this happening to me? Because
Totally.
for a while it was kind of like, what am I doing, dude? Like, come on.
Right before I ask you why this is happening. No, I mean, do you think you function? Okay, so you mentioned at least that song. I might be going down a rabbit hole that's not correct, but do you think you have nostalgia connected to your childhood moments that you?
I would say so for sure. There's definitely elements of that. I'm not even kidding. Like sometimes even listening to the songs that like my toddler likes to hear, I'll like there'll be like a moment and I'm just kind of
Yeah.
like and I think it's probably it's nostalgia is probably a big part of it, just because just being reminded of like a time in your life, you know what I mean, when everything was simple and kind of carefree and you felt protected. Like again, like you felt like your home was just impenetrable and everything is always going to work out, you know? But also just the innocence of it too. That's another thing too, is like I have a very strong will to preserve my children's innocence as long as I can.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we live in a world where innocence is the first thing to go once you're brought into this world, you know, and it's not really, doesn't seem to be valued as much,
Right.
you know?
When you say innocence, are you talking about sheltering, or are you talking about? I guess what do you mean by that? I'm curious.
I think it's a
I don't
combination
disagree,
of
I'm just
things.
curious.
No, it's okay. I think it's a combination of things. Like for one, like the optimism that comes with it, like thinking that the world is just amazing and beautiful and something to explore,
Yeah.
not something to be sheltered
I'm trying to
from.
get that back myself.
Me too, man.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly why it hits me so hard, because you kind of realize, you know, you kind of get beaten down by life over the years. And, but the truth is like you can, like I've met people that are still very much in touch with their inner child and they seem to be doing pretty well, you know? And I'm kind of like,
give me some.
yeah, like I want some of that. Like, it's not, you know, it's not like you have to adapt or die, you know, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you can make it work. It's
No,
just
it's literally just trauma showing its its head, right?
probably, man. Like, so it's that optimism, but also, yeah, innocence and just like, you know, when you think about just the way children process things, you know, and like the way they talk about things, and I mean, a lot of it has to do with optimism and just seeing the beauty in things and like not seeing the ugly that we see as we get older.
Yeah.
You know, now finding the balance from, because I don't want to shelter him. I don't want him to not know what the score, you know.
Yeah.
I want him to know the kind of world they're, but I want him to be smart about it,
Right.
you know. But that's something I feel like, you know, I got to wait till they're like 10 years old at minimum to even start hinting at stuff like that, you know.
I'm totally on board though with that idea of like just like keeping the happiness and the wonder that kids have, you know, in their brain. You know, we were talking how you've been playing guitar for over 10 years, you know, working guitarist for over 10 years, and your oldest is already 3. My oldest is already 11. And it's just like gone, you know. And I guess how do we get the wonder back if you've lost it? Or, I mean, I have a lot, and I'm working on that, trying to fall in love with every moment and take every day for the gravity that it deserves, you know. But yeah,
You know,
Tell me.
what's been, well, I mean, so I'm not like, I'm still learning this myself. I'm still figuring it out. But what seems to be working so far, and this is something I'm doing recently because, you know, my son, he's 3.5, and things are starting to show as far as like I'm starting to see patterns of behavior that I remember in myself. Not when I was that young. I don't remember that far back, but certain little interests in like seeing his imagination. Like if you give him a bunch of random toys, like he'll figure out how to make something cool out of it, right? So what I started doing was like, I'm just gonna get in there and be excited about it with him. Like
Yeah.
turn off everything around me. Like all my worries are still gonna be there.
Yeah.
Just like get in there and then just kind of get on his level. And for me, like the part of me that never grew up is very appreciative of that, because then it's like, yeah, we get to get excited about Legos or something.
That's a Tonka truck, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll just find like, or like if we have a bunch of dominoes, like let's make a cool little tower, just get in there. And man, I'm telling you, like it's good for the soul. Like as the parent, I think to get in there, and you're not just being a good sport and pretending it's exciting. It's like you're actually kind of tapping into that like thing that you miss about like our own childhoods.
Yeah.
And just to see him light up over that, whereas if we're just sitting there on our phones while they're playing, it's like, and I'm guilty of that too. And sometimes I'm like, what am I doing, dude?
Oh yeah.
Because
I think every time I'm like, what am I doing?
yeah, especially, well, I mean, you got, there'll be teenagers before you know it. Right. And once they get their phones, you don't want them to be like, oh, well, like that's what I try to remind myself of.
Totally.
Is like, I don't want them to grow up with memories of just me just being on my phone,
Yeah. I think also knowing that you can change what you do the next time that you hang out with them, like with more importance than feeling guilt about having not, or having been on the phone in the past, or having not been present or something, I mean, you're saying that, get down on your knees and play, with the dominoes and build with the kids. And I love that so much. And I just have to think about, some people are like, well, I haven't done that, so I'd feel guilty. And I think that maybe like just putting out there into the world that like, we can't change anything about what has happened, but we literally can change what we're doing today and tomorrow. And habits are hard to change. So just engage more, and you're making your life and their life and other people's lives better. But don't feel guilty about having not done that, or where you failed in the past.
Right. And I mean, that's, you're right. And I needed to hear that too, because I beat myself up over it all the time. But it's definitely one of those things where, the past is dead, right? There's nothing to be done about that. But what's happening now and what is going to happen, that's what you have control over. So, so take the opportunity. And if you find yourself and you're like, wait a second, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Okay. That's already a step in the right direction. You're starting to police yourself,
Yeah. Just throw the phone in the toilet, flush it.
Exactly. Right. Or find the nearest lake. Just
I mean, see so many times you can skip it, right? That'd be fun.
I did teach my son to tell me to say, "Daddy, get off your phone."
Awesome.
And every time he does, it's funny, because my first impulse is like, it's like I'm being nagged, right? And then I'm like, wait, no, you're right. I told you to do this, right? Boom, let's play,
That is awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's helped a lot. Sometimes you need to get help where you can get it,
That's killer.
But another fun thing too that I realized that really solidified things over this is that, like, I buy all these toys for him, and he'll play by himself sometimes, but like he'll really get interested in his toys if I'm down there playing with him first. Then he'll be like, I want to play with what you're doing. Like he's only interested in like what anyone else is having fun with,
That's awesome.
So I try to use that and let that be more motivation. It's like, and think to myself too, like how much money am I willing to spend buying more and more toys that he'll play for a week and then get bored of? It's like, I still have toys when he was an infant that we have there, that if I just figure out some way to make it seem like it's fun, he'll be all of a sudden like he's like, I just bought it for him.
That's awesome.
He'll just get interested. And so there's all kinds of reasons. There's pragmatic reasons behind it too, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So if that helps motivate,
Right. How do you personally deal with being gone for weeks at a time when you have to do that?
Well, I don't do that anymore. Like, so my limits are like, I'll do weekend turn and burns 4 or 5 days tops. This one that's coming up is very much like a white whale kind of thing, like, or whatever. It's super rare that I do it. And I'm doing it because, like I mentioned, I was begged to do it, which normally wouldn't be enough. But when I raised my rate and then they took that, I'm like, okay, well,
it makes it
I'll
worth
do
it.
I'll do it now. But I'm much more selective on how much time I spend away from home. Now, the kind of a good thing about the landscape today is that there's a lot less of like just being on the road for months and months and months at a time.
You mean just generally in the music
Generally,
industry?
yeah. Now, I mean, it does happen, but it's a lot less common than it used to be.
Is that COVID caused, or is it?
I think partially. A lot of things have changed since COVID, but I'm sure it was a contributing factor. But I feel like more, especially the type of artists I like to work with, it's just like we're just out for a weekend and back, and counting travel days and stuff. I'm gone maybe like 4 days at a time. And when I'm home the rest of the week, and I mean, granted, I'm working, but I work from home, and so I check in with the kids and I'm present as much as I can be, depending on how busy I am. But it's just nice to at least be under the same roof, during the week. So that helps. But I mean, even the weekends, man, they're getting harder because like my son is old enough now to where he kind of understands the gravity of dad's like leaving.
Yep.
Because in the beginning, it's like he's like, okay, bye, dad. Not realizing like I'm actually gone for a few days.
Yeah.
And man, he did the funniest thing. It was sad and hilarious. He did this thing where when I was doing a run in Canada, I was going to be gone for like maybe 4 days, and he's starting to now say like, "But I don't want you to leave," and I'm like, "I know, but I know."
Rips your heart out.
I know, and I would joke around and be like, "But I have to do this so I can make money and buy you more toys, right?" Like, but he did this thing, man, that was like. When I told him, I was like giving him a hug, and I was like, "I'm sorry, bud, but I promise I'll be back before you know it. Just gone a few days. I'm gonna go to Canada. He loves coins. I'll bring you some Canadian change, and he loves that stuff, right?" And then I remember he hung his head a little bit. He turned around and he went into a corner and he grabbed this like toy guitar that I got for him, and then he put it on, and then he wrapped himself in our drapes. And he just stood there with the guitar like he was about to write like a Cure song or something. Right. I'm like, dude, is my son getting emo all of a sudden? Like, I was like, dude, I almost like started bawling in that moment. But in retrospect, it was kind of adorable and kind of funny.
Oh, dude, it's so hard leaving the kids.
But just seeing him do that, like, and seeing him, like, the fact that he went for the guitar and just like kind of covered himself up, and he just was in this moment, I was like, I couldn't believe what I saw.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get easier if that's what you're asking.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But I also want to say, I think, in the same way that I think it's important to be present for your kids, I think it's also important for them to see what it means to work, So I don't know. We've been in a weird balance because both Carrie and I don't have like an 8 to 5 job. Like we're very untraditional and we're self-employed and we're always doing all kinds of different things. And I'm like, look, I'm playing music and I'm taking videos, and it looks like I'm playing almost to them,
Right.
So it's just a weird balance where like we have to like honor the fact that there's value to them witnessing work ethic, but it's also, so there's like part of the studio being separated. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to separate it, of course, but like it's important that I have time, especially like during summer breaks or whatever, like where I am working. I have to work. I have to get my stuff done. But
yeah, well, my wife and I are the same. We have very unconventional schedules. She's a flight attendant and she's in real estate. So like, both our schedules are just insane. It's madness, but we make it work. And, with the children, it's like, we're both very like, it's not like we hire babysitters all the time or try to get childcare. It's like, we really lean on ourselves to do it. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about like instilling the importance of work ethic. And, I can only imagine the perspective of like my son who understands that I work from home, but I'm like, I'm going to work and that means going upstairs. And he'll pop in, and I love when he does, And even if I'm like in a Zoom meeting or something, everyone loves seeing him. They all wave hi. He says hi. I let him hang out for a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, Daddy's got to work now.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But it's just, I don't know if he really yet understands. I mean, he's 3.5, so he probably won't for a while.
Yeah.
He is very smart for his age, but I'm hoping he sees, because I do work a lot, despite what I do and working from home and stuff. And like the hard part is balance, because when at least when you go to an office, it's like you have set hours.
Yep.
And then once you're home, you've left work over there.
Yep.
The hard part is like working where you live, because it's like it's hard to relax sometimes, because you're like, I could be working right now.
Yeah.
But then it's also hard to work, so I could be relaxing right now.
Totally. Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough. I've been working from home for maybe 5 years. Sorry, I take that back. Since like 2017, 2016, so a little longer than that. But yeah, like it's still tough finding that balance.
I struggle especially when the family's home, of like staying purely focused and actually getting good deep work done. I have a co-working spot that I go to also that helps me like get away to, either do editing or write different things that I need to write, because I just need like a scenery change, and also I guess a lack of responsibility surrounding me, just for mental clarity, for me to at least get certain creative tasks done. But
oh yeah, the change of scenery thing is powerful, man. Like when I was living in San Diego, actually, it was mainly because we didn't have a house, and like we didn't have a spot for like an office, but I did rent out like a little studio, a room that I would set up like my backdrop for shooting lesson videos and recording and stuff like that. And that did help, now having kids and stuff, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I could go back to that, but I can see, I mean, it'd be nice to have like a WeWork or whatever. I don't know where you go to, but like
Switch Yards is the one I go to. But,
oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm open, I live out in Lebanon, so like, it's like, there's not a whole lot going on out there.
Right.
I've been leaning a lot into, like stuff like binaural beats, so you can get into a flow state and just really work, because it's like with what we do, it's not like you're productive the minute you sit at your desk.
No.
You kind of have to like rev up to it, and like a lot of times it'll take me like an hour to do that. And then when I'm finally in that state, I hear my door open. Daddy, I want to give you a hug before nap time. And then I'm like, I love you so much, bud. I really wish you didn't come in though. Cause like now it's going to take me another hour. But of course, he's always going to come first. And so like,
of course.
But then it's just like, being in that state of like, okay, then I have to do this again, and there's likely going to be another interruption, and like that tends to happen a lot, and it like snowballs. Next thing you know, an entire day has passed, and you've gotten maybe 2 hours of work done.
Oh, and that sounds amazing. Good job on it. 2 hours. I sincerely struggle with what you're talking about. Like it is literally like sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's an hour just to get back on track, and then to me it's like somebody open and close the fridge. I'm like, are they going to open my door now or not? And which for context is right next to my desk,
Right.
So yeah.
Did they leave the door open, or like, I have to go check?
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's so bad. My favorite thing so far, I mean, I love so much of what you've shared, but is telling your kids for you to get off the phone. Yeah. I think that's one of the most responsible human things I've heard in a long time. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I mean, it was my wife's idea actually. And I at first thought, which was in retrospect was a really silly thought, but I was like, is it healthy to teach your kids to like give you commands? Because you're trying to teach them the whole authority of, like I do this half jokingly, but with my son, like, cause he's very, I could tell he's a lot like I was, growing up, because he likes to he has something to say about everything. He doesn't just take a command and say, okay, daddy. I have to always remind him, like, remember what we talked about? When I say do something, you say, and he's like, okay, daddy. I'm like, thank you. Please keep doing that. But he doesn't, he likes to, and sometimes I'll have to remind him, like, who's the boss, dude?
Right.
And he'll be like, me? I'm like, no. haha, right? Like,
Yeah.
who's the boss? He's
Right.
like, you and mommy. Like, yes, okay. I tell you things for a reason, dude. Like,
Yeah.
but so there was a part of me that was like, is that healthy for that? But
Right.
I think it's more important that I'm kept in check wherever I can get it.
I just think it's so great because it is such an intrusive, terrible, and completely like all encompassing for most people, I think, issue, just societally,
Right.
So I think it's fascinating. Other than seeing a million magical moments with your family over the coming years, as life continues to move on, what are you most excited about for you and the world and everything?
Well, it's hard to say, man, because I kind of have no expectations about it. And I say that
Okay.
like not jokingly, like I mean it. I
Yeah.
mean that. So if anything, I'm in a position now to where I'm very comfortable and happy with where I'm at in what I do. And I just look forward to maintaining that for as long as, the
What
industry allows.
if you were to be hopeful and playful and dreamy about it with the wonder of the kids we talked about, right?
Okay.
Like where would you like to see things go if you just dreamed? Like what would be some realities that would be fun that you would enjoy?
Well, okay. When you put it like that, and I mean, this has a little bit of pragmatism to it, but it's like, I have hope that there's going to be a correction as far as like with like things like AI just really flooding markets now, and uh, like really easily digestible things like TikToks and stuff are such a. I feel like we're gonna start to realize like, okay, that's like it's like when you're full after eating, you're like, okay, I can't eat another bite. I need to take a minute and like digest and do something else. I'm kind of hoping that we reach a point where we start to see the value in like longer form things, like we talked about with conversations. And I think if it starts with conversations, like podcasts being a thing, like long form podcasts, people will start to want to converse more, want to actually talk things through, will enjoy longer form content in general, and it'll start to move away from this like kind of like cheap like 15 seconds at a time like I feel like there's more of us that are, and I'm even seeing this in younger folks too, and like in the Gen Z, like they're starting to realize that technology's become such a huge part in how they were raised, and they kind of want to know what it was like to grow up without that.
They want to go counterculture to that. Right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's a countercultural
beautiful.
kind of
Yeah.
movement, and with every counterculture, there will be a counter to that, but that's far off, right now, I think. So I feel like we're kind of reaching a countercultural movement in that sense where people are going to value art again. They're going to value time in general, like the time you put into things, you know? I don't know. Which I think that alone is would make such a huge impact
Yeah.
on the world we live in general, that I can hinge enough hope on that, and I think that'll take care of a lot of things.
Yep. I think you have multiple times accurately pushed into that human connection aspect of it. And I think that that's 100% right. Another reason I love doing these podcasts in person. Like it's like different than a Zoom-ish call. I'm not saying that I won't ever do that, but I put a little bit more friction on myself to have people engage in person,
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the effort, man.
Totally. Where do we have people find you?
Um,
And how can they support you? Because you've got a pedal thing too, right?
yeah. Well, thanks, man. I didn't even think about that. Well, okay. If you want to find me, so I teach guitar for a company called Guitar Mastery Method, and we have a YouTube channel that's doing really well. But we also do like paid courses and memberships and stuff like that. That's if you want to look at my guitar lesson stuff. As far as like my goings on musically or whatever, you can look me up, Eddie Haddad on Facebook. I have a page. I also have an Instagram. My Instagram is Onward and Edward. It's Onward _and _Edward. And as far as my pedal, I have a couple offerings on the pedal front. If you're a gear nerd, messiahguitars.com. You can find my pedals, the Eddie Boost Drive, and we recently put out the Little Ed, which is a mini overdrive pedal. And I'm excited to get your thoughts on it, man, too, because like I said, it's something that for recording, I really wanted like a good like EQ sculpting kind of like problem-solving sort of overdrive pedal for both live and in the studio, but especially in the studio, you know.
Well, let's just bring it over next time and we'll write a song.
I'd love that. That'd be great. Let's do it. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing with other people you think might gain value from it. My name is Seth Schaeffer. This is Behind the Act.